25 years in McKinsey. Tell us a little bit more about that.
When I started at McKinsey, I had no idea that I would spend so many years here. You don't know 50% of your lifetime earnings come what you learn at work. And so the good news is 50% comes from...
How does ballet become a metaphor for managing a career?
I think the entire experience is incredibly humbling. If we look at economic booms, oftentimes you will see a breakthrough technology. We ask ourselves is, with generative AI, how much of a difference does it make? And the answer is pretty simple. It makes a huge difference.
Will AI be more creative than us at some point? Hey everybody, welcome to another great episode on the Places We'll Go show. Now today, we are genuinely really honored to have Lareina Yee, a senior partner at McKinsey Company, joining us here today. Now, Lareina is joining us from right way over the pond from the Bay Area, and she spent nearly 25 years with McKinsey, advising companies on growth, organizations, and tech-enabled transformation. Now, Lareina is also chair of McKinsey's Technology Council, so she's a leading voice in generative AI. My God, never heard that before, eh? I'm sure we'll get into that a lot, as well as another whole host of emerging technologies. Now, recently, she's also spearheaded the publication of a range of pivotal reports, including Technology Trends Outlook, the Economic Potential of Generative AI, and the CEO's Guide to Generative AI as well. So we're really looking forward to doing a little bit of a deep dive into what that means for us, people listening in here today. So beyond all of our expertise in technology, Lareina has also been a trailblazer for diversity and inclusion. She served as McKinsey's first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and she co-founded the groundbreaking Women in the Workplace study in collaboration with none other than leanin.org and the Wall Street Journal. Outside of her professional life, Lareina also contributes to the arts and education, serving on the board of San Francisco Ballet and on the advisory council of the Clayman Institute for Gender Research at Stanford, and, my God, how do you pack it all in, Lareina? Beyond a Bernard program at Columbia University as well. So look, you're really in here for a treat. It's going to be a fantastic episode. I can't wait to get stuck in. Welcome, Lareina.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Fabulous to have you on, Lareina. I am exhausted listening to that.
I am too.
And so Richie says, ask that
I
question.
did my homework, guys. Come on.
Yeah. No, but Richie asked that question. How do you pack it all in? So I'm gonna start there. I mean, that is prolific in the extreme. So tell us, how do you juggle all these things?
First of all, it's not prolific. I think you just take it step by step. And, I think you follow where your passions and professional journey takes you. And over 25 years, that can add up. So it's a bit of luck. It's a lot of hard work. And I think if I were to read back your resume, if I were to use Gemini or ChatGPT, I bet I could have quite an extraordinary intro for anyone as well. That is the.
Too modest.
No, I really do think so.
But hey, look, it's no small feat. 25 years in McKinsey. I mean, the quintessential consulting firm. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I would say that when I started at McKinsey, I had no idea that I would spend so many years here. And I think maybe that's for younger listeners or people thinking about their careers. You don't know where the world will take you. So I remember I had the most extraordinary first year. And what I remember about it is I learned so much. And that kind of cognitive awakening was something that was really memorable. And as a result, I said, maybe it would be great to stay 2, 3, 4 years. And now look at me. It's been a long time.
Well, in 25 years, that is a shift. There's going to have been some twists and turns and detours and roundabouts. So tell us about some of the pivot points maybe in that time.
Well, I think I've had a lot of different careers within one career. So one thing I will say for younger audiences that are making their way through the world is that maybe you stay in one company, maybe you go to 5 or 6. In fact, actually, statistically, most people go to many. But I think what's most important is the substance of what you're doing in that company. And so are they giving you opportunities to stretch, to learn, to do something, to challenge yourself? Do you feel connected to the mission? Do you have a community at best, almost like a work family, but certainly do you feel connected? And for me, at every stage, it's felt that way. And that's the part that I feel incredibly grateful for. But I think you also have to be proactive in creating that community. How do you bring people together? How do you stretch yourself to say, let me try something that, I don't know. One interesting statistic is that we know our McKinsey Global Institute has done research on something we call experience capital. And the punchline of it is that 50% of your lifetime earnings come from what you learn at work, your work experience. And so the good news is 50% comes from all that hard work you did at school, at university, to learn things and to, be that great student and to get that diploma. The other good news is 50% is what you do in the job. And so how you acquire that experience capital, how you go after that is actually, half of your lifetime earnings.
Well, hey, that's amazing to hear, and I love the balance and the blend between the role of what you learned at college and how you do that, as well as continuing your education into the workplace, and your thought about really getting those diverse experiences is really enriching for us. And it's interesting. You mentioned the McKinsey's Global Institute, and of course it's a powerhouse of knowledge. And we often, wherever you live in the world, sort of read a host of reports that come from there. And the one that's most perhaps resonant with me, that stayed in my mind, it came out a few years ago, was the way that the world will need to upskill and reskill. And I think there was some tremendous numbers that came through. I believe it was like 300 million people by 2030. Don't quote me on that, but it was very much a tectonic shift, and particularly given the expertise you have as a consequence of things like AI. And so when we talk about capital and how we're trying to foster a career and developing skills, how does somebody equate that in today's sort of context where we're sort of just at the cusp of this AI revolution, and we sort of and we still need to try and, I guess, have those fulfilling careers, trying to build skills in the areas that are going to matter in 10, 15 years' time?
Yeah.
Hard question, maybe big question.
Well, it's a huge question, but a completely relevant question for us, but also has been relevant over the last century. If we look at economic booms and what has propelled us forward, oftentimes you will see a breakthrough technology. And so that could be all the way back to the steam engine. You could go all the way back in time, but maybe a little closer to our generation is the internet. That was like a completely new paradigm. There are businesses that didn't even exist. There's a whole field of that we work in collectively around digital marketing, which I know is kind of part of your bailiwick and people that you interview here. There were whole types of jobs and economy and different ways of living and working created by a singular shift in technology. You can take a look at digital, you can take a look at cloud, you can take a look at changes in connectivity. There's always been some breakthrough technology that has propelled us forward. So one of the things is we've been tracking since 2017 the impact of automation technologies on our work, our lives, and on economy. And probably some of the numbers that you're thinking about is most recently, we updated that with the advent of generative AI. And the question we asked ourselves is, with generative AI, how much of a difference does it make? And the answer is pretty simple. It makes a huge difference, to the order of $4.4 trillion of GDP productivity value. And when we think about 4.4 trillion, it's just like a mind-boggling number. It's not something that we would achieve from a productivity perspective right away. It's something that we would achieve over 1, 2, maybe 3 decades. But it shows the outer limit of where could you find growth. And I think all businesses globally are looking for growth. And with that is also change in jobs. And it will be, and it already is unfolding as a story of new jobs created, jobs transformed, and yes, some jobs lost. And so it will be incredibly important how we as business leaders, as humans, architect the change in front of us.
It's a big, big deal. I think once we go down the Gen AI rabbit hole, that will be what we talk about. So I'm going to allow myself one question.
Resist going down the rabbit hole.
Just one question.
Damn it, I fell for it early on.
No, I know, but just before we do, because I think there's another layer, just to hear you talk about careers more generally? And then I think we'll get back to
Sure.
inevitably what does AI mean for careers. But ballet, in the coaching I do, I love to use metaphors. So I'm going to invite you to talk about how ballet as a metaphor represents navigating a career. I can imagine you might talk about balance and composure and practice and discipline and all sorts of things. But how does ballet become a metaphor for managing a career?
Well, Mark, no one's actually asked me that before.
There you go.
Well, one thing I would say from inspiration about ballet is I do think as as you're in a position professionally to give back, I think some of the best is to give back to what helped you grow up. And so I studied ballet all the way until I went to university. And I think the entire experience is incredibly humbling. I think the first thing you learn is the value of hard work and the importance of practice. It's not that you can just walk on stage and do something, or in a studio, you're naturally able to do it. Certainly there's some intrinsics involved in terms of your body and your capabilities, but the vast majority of it is how much you practice and how much hard work you give to it. I also think it was humbling because at a pretty young age, I knew that I probably wouldn't be a professional ballerina. And that's something you learn very young. I wasn't tall enough. I didn't have enough of the natural intrinsics, even though I was working really hard. And I think one of the things that taught me is that you can still love something and you can still learn a lot and not necessarily be the best at it, not necessarily become the prima ballerina. You could just actually gain so much joy from it. And then you have to kind of walk that back and say, well, what kind of joy do you gain from that? As opposed to the achievement or the kind of external sort of recognition of being a certain status, going to New York City Ballet or being a member of the San Francisco Ballet. And for me, I think the joy of movement has been something that I've kept all through my life. And the ability to translate emotion into movement. And that's a pretty fundamental thing to learn, both joy, both grief, anxiety, any type of emotion. And the ability to connect how you feel with how you move your body is a pretty amazing skill. And so, and it's not, it's not something other people want to take a look at, but it's the idea that you can have that. I also think one of the things that's really interesting about ballet is that it is one of the most traditional performing arts sort of formats. But what we see now is, how do you modernize it? How do you think about different places and spaces? How do you think about choreography that expresses things in new ways? How do you take a traditional work that looked and felt and identified a certain way, that may have been kind of developed in concert with a piece of music that is over 100 years old, and how do you bring a modern, relevant flair to it? How do you recreate it? So I think there's also something incredible. While I have no choreography skills, but there's something incredible about being in a world where old things can be recreated into modern things. And even traditional things can have relevance to your time in life. So I don't know if there's anything concise I would say, but there are a lot of lessons. I think something Mark and Richie we've talked about is, what are the human capabilities, whether you're a CMO or you're a dancer or you're a choreographer or you're artistic director. And I think certainly, and it's very popular to say this now, but I think quite deeply, resilience is so much of it. And, when you kind of make a mistake, how is that actually a moment of expansion versus contraction? And then how do you get up and you try it again? And then you try it again. And by the way, how do you make sure you're not afraid of criticism? I remember when I was quite young, we had teachers that came from Russia, and they had a completely different way of teaching. You can maybe visualize it. And there was sort of no softness. there was no subtlety. It was like directly to the children to tell the young girls and boys exactly what was going on. And it was incredibly instructive to say, well, no, bring it on. Tell me how I could be better. Now give me a shot to do it again, and give me a shot to do it again. And by the way, all of this isn't going to ladder into me becoming a ballerina on stage, but I'm learning a craft, and I'm so appreciative of the opportunity.
What a beautiful answer there, Lorena, and so many lovely lessons taken from that. Um, Putting you on the spot with an insightful question there, Mark, but I think it was a really, really lovely way that you framed it. And the thing that really resonated with me about your thought was when you said how can you take something that is so traditional and move it into the contemporary. And the analogy I'll draw, in fact, I was just at a dinner 2 nights ago, and there was a wonderful presentation talking about, we always talk about speed of light change, and of course, that's part of our jobs to do. But actually, part of it is also identifying what doesn't change. What are the fundamentals, whether it comes to customer behaviors, whether it comes to, shifts in society that are more enduring. And I find that quite refreshing when you think about, well, how do you mesh both tradition, contemporary together, but recognizing what will ultimately change and what won't change, and there certainly will be some of those things in the mix.
I also think there's something about teamwork because, I don't personally have the type of talent to innovate a traditional Shakespeare play into a modern ballet in different format and modality. But Tamara does. She's the artistic director. So then you say, what can I do to contribute to that? Well, I mean, I've spent a lot of years in business. So how can I help with, how can I be a supporting character in how you think about that? And I think that's also something pretty exciting, which is professionally or even in your personal endeavors, how can you be a part of something where you connect with the mission? You don't necessarily need to lead it. Maybe you are actually leading it, but you could also be part of the team that creates that outcome. And I think that is very, very exciting. And I think the reflection of how you spend your time, your 24 hours a day is one of the most precious commodities that you have. So spending it purposefully matters a lot.
There was a meme on TikTok going back a few months. I think 84,400, the number of seconds you have every day. Make sure you use them.
Some of which you should use for sleep.
Indeed.
And recovery and reflection.
Indeed. So again, I'm going to just one more thought before we go into Gen AI. We couldn't skip over your diversity, equity, and inclusion work. That would be wrong to miss that. So I'm interested to hear a bit. What's the question? There was a bit of a boon post-COVID, came into the limelight, much more force and momentum. Do you see the ebbing a bit? And if so, how do we fix that? And then one specific one, because I was double header, classic, don't ask two questions, but neurodiversity is something that we've explored a lot in this show. So from your perspective, with your oversight, where does that fit in the mix? So it's a double header, apologies, but hopefully that's okay.
Well, let's take gender diversity as an example. Getting the workplace right for 50% of the population is never out of fashion. So whether that was before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, doing the right thing for the people who work in your companies is always the right thing. And that is not a political statement, it's not a social statement, it's just a reality. And if people want to see research that businesses with diversity do better, if they want to see success stories of what that looks like, if they want to hear the experience of what does it feel like to walk into the room as an only versus what does it feel like to walk in a room that's actually inclusive, there's an enormous amount of literature. We contribute to that, but so many others do as well. So I think one thing is this is not something that's about a trend. It's about what, in your self-interest as a business leader or, in your self-interest as a member of the as a member of human society. In terms of actually what's going on, it is, I think that most companies have been on a journey, and that journey has been at least a decade, if not longer. And for a lot of companies, it's spanned multi-generational in the sense of it's been a priority, a top priority for 1, 2, 3 CEOs. And then I think the conundrum has been the vast majority, and almost every time, we ask business executives, we do surveys, we do interviews, the intent is very strong. The intent is very positive, very high. The challenge is the execution tends to be pretty sloppy. And so the delta between positive intent and the actual lived experience, that's the piece that a lot of our research has tried to bridge, which is when business leaders have positive intent, but they don't see the results in the day-to-day, what could happen differently? What could you do differently to change that? And for us, at least, diversity is a huge topic. We kind of focus on the area we understand better, which is business and organizational change. So how do you think about systematic shifts in business and culture? And also, how do you empower individuals? One of the pieces that we've spent a lot of time writing about is how do you think about managers? The vast majority of an employee's experience, both men and women, will be with their manager. So it's not just that the CEO has to say, gosh, I think it would be really great for us to have an inclusive workplace. But it also has to be concrete in how a manager runs and leads the day-to-day. So, there's a ton that we could talk about, but I do think what's quite much in the press is that there is a backlash, or, we've gone backwards. And, to be honest, over the last 2 decades, we've gone 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Is that a heightened reality right now? For some nooks and crannies of the world, yes. Absolutely, we've seen kind of a drawback. But there are also several companies, many, tons, who are continuing to move forward. And so sometimes I think it's important not to get too caught up in what people say they do, but actually look more carefully at what is happening. And when we do our benchmarking, we see that there are a ton of companies that continue to make step-by-step progress. And I think those are the ones we need to focus on. So Mark, you also asked about neurodiversity. I think one of the things that's been awesome over the last, decade, but more popularized over the last 4 or 5 years is people are understanding that gender diversity is one of, 10, 15 ways you might define diversity. And what we're really trying to get at is what is the day-to-day experience? Is it inclusive? Is it something that feels fair and balanced? Does it bring everybody in? And so one of the great things is there's more academic research and there's more application of a broader understanding of diversity. Some of that could be neurodiversity. Some of that is ethnic diversity. I think there are a lot of different ways that you can define that. And it's not about sort of the 1%. It's about actually creating the 100%. And really recognizing that sometimes people don't present diverse in how you see them. They're actually diverse in how you can't see them. So what's really important is a workplace that works for all people, which is like kind of a pretty basic principle. But if you look at the data in all measures, we fall pretty behind in that. And even, we often show women may feel this way about the workplace. But actually, sometimes what I like to say is you should just look at the overall statistics, because actually even the men are saying that they're not really that supported by their manager. They're not seeing the next opportunities. It's just relative to their low score. Women's scores are completely low. And if you're a woman of color, your score is even lower. But at the end of the day, the absolute number tends to be pretty low. So, I think one thing is there's just a cry for higher quality leadership. And how do you think about bringing everyone into that?
Thank you for that, Lareina. That's really insightful there. And I love that thought when you think about, the yardsticks. And speaking of change, you mentioned that, at the heart of most organizations today is the need and desire, regardless of where you sit in the world, for growth. And I think to this point, when we think about the world of AI and generative AI, it's typically, certainly in the first instance, the first thing that often springs to mind is a world of automation and perhaps cost efficiency, as opposed to using it as a growth lever. And I wondered if you could perhaps, help us flip the thought process on its head a little bit and talk about how we can use things like AI as a growth lever to kind of really fuel our businesses to the next level.
I mean, let's take it all the way down to the individual human. So, one of the things we talked about a couple of minutes ago is the value of experience capital. The idea that 50% of your lifetime earnings come from your work experience. So, what I would add to that is how do you, as an individual, think about this amazing technology as something that you can learn, you can become a power user of, and could expand your career opportunities? So, like, even, before we even get to companies and economies, how about just taking it to an individual? So,
Agreed.
if I am a digital marketer today, and I have spent the last 10 years and I have a certain set of skills and capabilities, instead of kind of saying, I don't want to see this technology, how about learning, using it, and saying, how can I innovate what I do with this technology? How can I create things that don't exist today with this? Or even more simply, how can I be just more productive myself? Which isn't a cost question, it's actually a quality question. So, one of the things that people are talking a lot about is agentic AI. And agentic AI is basically you have really smart kind of generative AI systems, but they can also take an action. And so one of the ways to think about it is, what if you, Richie, had 3 agents with you? They're Richie's agents. They travel with you all the time. They're infinitely patient. One is your coach and scheduler, thinking about your needs, your balance, making sure that your day is perfectly optimized around you and giving you feedback. Like, by the way, Richie, remember you wanted to do that, that run at 4 o'clock, and it's time to go. It's a lot of traffic in downtown London. We're going to need an extra 20 minutes. I could have used that yesterday since I was literally 20 minutes late to a meeting because of traffic, and like taking contextual information, feeding it to you so that you can stay on track. So that's like a logistics person. What if you had Richie's, AI agent who's the researcher and saying, Richie, I know that these are the 5 things that you care about. And I've been, while you've been recording a podcast, I've been searching through the world of general information. And I found that, like, of the kind of 100 authors that you follow, one of them just did a speech in Nairobi, and I wanted to give you a copy of that. And I've synthesized it down to the 6 bullets, just for you to think about,
Amazing.
right? And so none of this, and then you have another agent that's maybe, helping you draft things. And also, so there are all these type of things. Or like, hey, Richie, I know you're having dinner and you're bringing your 6 friends over, based on your refrigerator and based on your budget, this would be the optimal thing of the remainder that you can buy. And by the way, if you want and if you say yes, we'll order that through Instacart because your credit card's already set up for that. And then if you said, well, by the way, could you problem solve with me because, my budget's a little tight this month. I'd like to do that for 20% less. Sure, here's a configuration of a different menu for your 5 friends. And by the way, Richie, you probably don't need all that wine anyway. So we'll take it back and just have a glass of champagne at the beginning, and that will be festive. But like, you would have a conversation and, travel with a sort of a personal set of AI agents and capabilities that's not about disintermediating you. It's actually about giving you superpowers. And that may sound a little bit like sci-fi and a little bit phantasmic, but the actual technology capabilities for this pretty much exist today. Now, what doesn't exist yet is the human change capacity to digest all of that. And that might take us a year, that might take us 10 years. But the technology itself can do the things that I just mentioned to you.
I think it's. I've heard agentic AI a few times. I think it could be amazing, and I like the way you immediately went to what's the benefit for the individual.
Absolutely.
If I go to a different space, which is a question, how is this a source of competitive advantage? Because the internet isn't, as it's matured as a technology. Mobile isn't. Gen AI has the possibility to be, but where does that come from? Is it to be more efficient, to be more creative, to be better research? At an organizational level, where does the competitive advantage in Gen AI lie? I can't think of anybody better placed to answer that question. I know it's not an
Well,
easy
I
one,
think
but
there are a lot of people that are well placed to answer that question. So I'll take a stab and you can use generative AI to compare if my answer foots up with the other people you would
obviously.
listen to. And you can triangulate that real time and give me feedback on the podcast. So I think there are a couple of different ways that it enhances competitiveness. So first of all, if you think, if you think kind of here and now, certainly bottom line costs, productivity is always something that companies need to be thinking about. And so there's no doubt that, similar to automation technology we've seen before, you can automate tasks, you can automate potentially some types of jobs, you can make things go faster. You could also move things from paper-based to digital much quicker, because one of the things that these models do is they're able to process unstructured data. So, if you're an insurance company, you have tons of sort of pieces of paper that go back and forth and is a really complicated human chain, you could actually reconfigure that. So for sure, there's just raw productivity cost benefits. But there are also growth benefits in innovation, which is it's kind of hard to believe that any company will still be kind of a top 500 or 100, you pick your index of choice in the equity markets. It's hard to stay on top if you're not innovating. And so generative AI can be quite a bit that arc of innovation. So let's just give a concrete example of that. One of the things it's incredibly good at is changing the sort of reconfiguring product development. So you might be able to actually have products out in market that are closer to what customers want, faster. So if you can improve product development, that really matters. The other thing is generative AI opens the ability to reconfigure or transform how you think about work overall. So take, for example, a bank. Right now, we optimize how we think about fraud processes. And then, we can use generative AI to check for, anomaly testing in the data or something like that. But we could also just say, why wouldn't we think about the fraud process altogether in a different way and use these tools to actually have a much better process? Or how do we think, closer to marketing? How do we, we can use these tools for higher quality response to a customer moment. Or we can use these tools to actually go upstream and be anticipatory of what a customer would want and actually change the way we interact. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can start to push the envelope. And then I think you have to kind of take a look at historical examples, which is maybe you're not monetizing the internet or search per se, but think of all the businesses that didn't exist before and were sort of born out of this. I think for many retailers, they bemoan the Amazon moment where like a digital business came in and completely changed their whole industry. Never mind kind of taking top spot in terms of market cap and, all these type of corporate measures that you look at. But I think really importantly, relevance. How they thought about business and transaction and commerce paved the way for changing customer expectations overall. And you don't want to be the company that's following that. You want to be the company that's creating that. So, as Andy Grove said, only the paranoid survive. I think this is a moment to be positively paranoid.
That's just absolutely great. Positively paranoid.
Yes,
One of
we
the
don't
big
want people to be
debate.
panicked. But,
Fair, fair.
a little bit
Most
of competitive pressure to say, you don't know yet, the disruptive businesses and ways of thinking that could put you out of position. So why
Yeah.
not take the technology and start leading and figuring it out and being the innovator?
Well, I remember an old mentor of mine always used to say that in a career that you should always have a healthy level of paranoia amongst and about you. So like you say, you can keep yourself on your toes.
We also call it a
Lorena,
growth mindset. I think that's the more
well,
positive way to say it, which is you have a growth mindset to learn new things and try new things. So, we can also say it in a softer way.
that is true. That is true. I adopted the Russian mentality then, as your ballet teacher once did.
Yes, yes.
Um, I a big popular debate in amongst marketing circles is the role that Gen AI can play in creativity, and can it genuinely? It almost feels like this is a holy preserve of human EQ, that we will reign and be more creative than Gen AI ever can. And I wonder what's your perspective on whether are we holding on to an empty vessel, or indeed, what will still remain the conserve of the human in the context of a marketing process, and will AI be more creative than us at some point?
I do not think we're in a race for creativity. Sometimes the way I think about it is, imagine if I only had pencils, black and white, to express something. And then all of a sudden, I was given color pencils, and I was given markers and paint. And, maybe I was also given clay, and given all these other materials to create an expression, to do something. I mean, that would be the positive way to think about all of these new tools, which is, how does it open up your ability to do what you do differently? So one of the most inspiring artists, I think, is Rafiq Adnol. And a lot of people know him. He's a professor at UCLA. His work has been everywhere. And he has one of the largest photographic collections, image collections of the Amazon. And then he has learned how to he has created generative AI models to create art and to reimagine visual art. And I don't remember exactly what the number was, but his installation in the MoMA caught people's attention for far more minutes standing there than other traditional pieces of art. And the idea is that you can use, it's a great example of, you can use these tools and capabilities to also rethink your craft. And you're still the artist. So, yes, can generative AI, in a more, pedantic way, can it do some of the activities that are, part of the creative process? Yes, it can make your research more efficient. Yes, you can use its tools like Notebook LM to store all of your ideas and source things. Yes, is it multimodal? Does it have, will it eventually even have like sort of smell, but does it have visual and, audio and text, and can it mix those things? Absolutely. And so, are there things in your job that it can, quote, replace? Sure. But the other way to think about it is, now you have a completely new canvas. So how do you think about that? And then I think the last thing is, as much as, AI is amazing, one of the things that it will not do is it doesn't replace human to human interaction. And I think, over time, or at least I think, that the quality of that, and the time that is truly interactive across humans, is really important. And in some ways, with all the modern technology and business processes we have, a lot of people spend time not with actual people. So it is a very concrete example. In our global benchmarking for direct sales, the average seller across companies spends about 40% of their time customer facing. It's a relatively low number when you think about it. Like, a salesperson, what are they really good at? They're really good at being with people. So like, if you use this technology to help them actually spend more time being with people, it's interesting. One, it speaks to probably why they're in sales overall and what they're really good at naturally, even before you've upskilled them or changed their skills. Two, more customer facing time tends, not always, but tends to lead to higher, revenue, higher sales. And so, you start to think about this and you say, wait a second, this could be a win for the person. It's a win for the technology. It's a win for the company. Is it really that bad?
Very true.
Well, that's unfortunately, time has whizzed by, and we have come to the end of this
I don't know
delightful
if have we
conversation.
touched on the things that you wanted to with the right depth.
We we have, because I think that's a lovely note to end on when you talked about human to human conversations. And as long as I'm not plugged into the matrix, like, and you're not either, and we're not actually AI bots, then I think we've had a lovely human to human interaction and conversation. We could have gone on and talked for a lot further, but and so unfortunately we have come to the end. But it's been an absolute cracker. I love the fact that actually just putting you on the spot about the ballet question is a great example. I don't think a Gen AI, whatever it is, could ever do that. That was a lovely moment. But you've also talked about being positively paranoid. You've talked about, with regards to DEI, execution's been a bit sloppy. You've talked. I love the metaphor of we've now got our colouring pens and clay and all sorts for greater creativity. And I think you have said AI is ultimately a tool that can help humanity. And I think you brought that to life really nicely. So thank you for your time, Lareina. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast, and I know it will go down a storm with our listenership.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's been a great conversation, a human to human conversation with a bit of technology helping us connect.
Love it.